Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Let's give a moment as the room is filling up here. All right. Okay. Wonderful, everybody. So welcome to this year's Green Soapbox event for 2023. This is our online panel discussion that we host annually to showcase and talk about an event that's really important and pertinent to us as a community and as a Midwest region. And this year we are talking about regional infrastructure for climate and community impact. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Patrick Murphy. I'm the Senior Lead for Development and Communications here at Delta Institute. And I'm just going to go over a few introductory slides, talk about how this whole event is going to work, talk a little bit about Delta Institute, and then kick us off to the panel discussion, which is what we're really here to talk about. So let's go ahead and get things started. So Delta Institute, who are we? We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to collaborate with communities across the Midwest to solve complex environmental challenges. This is our mission and vision, but more importantly, I'd encourage you all to check out our website, delta-institute.org. You've already been on it most likely because you signed up for today's event, but be sure to check it out more in depth if you haven't already. We have plenty of news articles and tools, publications, upcoming events about volunteering, ways you can donate, all kinds of goodies. So be sure to check that out. And if you're interested in supporting us, we have a big mission and we have a big impact to go right along with it. Right here is our impact statement. We're talking about serving 1,000 farmers over the next few years as part of our strategic plan to ultimately help transition 1 million acres of Midwest farmland. We're talking about helping communities mitigate 100 million gallons of stormwater annually by investing $100 million in municipal investments. All kinds of great agricultural, nature-based climate solutions, and sustainable business consulting as well that we provide as part of this work. So all of this is through the lens with a commitment to transparency as well that I should highlight. Those two badges that you see there, it's the top 10th of 1% of all nonprofits that get to talk about those badges because we have a platinum seal of transparency from GuideStar and a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. So if you're interested in making a donation, especially with Earth Day right around the corner, be sure to check us out. Another way that you can support us is through our silent auction. So you may have seen this in emails from today or from yesterday. This just launched, so you can still get in while the bidding is still early. We have lots of goodies that you can bid on: concert tickets here in Chicago, aquarium tickets, artisan vegan cupcakes, all kinds of goodies, and all proceeds benefit the mission here at Delta Institute. So if you're interested, scan that QR code. We'll have it again at the end of this evening. It's also on the website. It's in your emails, all kinds of goodies. Be sure to check that out. If you're thinking about gifts, something for yourself, spoil yourself a little bit, all kinds of stuff there. And if you're looking about volunteering, or if you know somebody who is an emerging professional that cares deeply about climate action and environmental justice, stewardship, conservation, the Delta Emerging Leaders are a pretty cool group because they're the ones that help put together this whole entire event, actually. They serve 1-year renewable terms. And as of today, we just opened up the application for next year, beginning July 1st. So if you know somebody who'll be interested in joining the Dells, that's what we call them, be sure to pass that along. We just opened that up, delta-institute.org/Dells. We also have a couple events that we're going to be at over the next couple months as well. We'll be at the Reusapalooza event in Chicago. We have a recruitment event in May, all kinds of stuff. You can find that. Go to our homepage. All the way at the bottom, you'll see all of that stuff that's at the bottom of the homepage there. And be sure to follow us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. All kinds of stuff there. Feel free to engage with us tonight. Talk about quotes that you found particularly meaningful or anything that you just want to engage with us on. We want to hear from you. We want you to make sure that you also know what's going on with us. So a few housekeeping items for the rest of the evening. Automated closed captions are provided. You should be able to see them right there at the bottom of your screen. We also ask that you use any questions that you have by using the Q&A button as part of Zoom. You can also put them in chat. It's just more likely that we'll see it first in the Q&A. So I encourage you, if you have any Q&A, any questions you want to ask any of our panelists, be sure to drop that in the Q&A button. You can also ask them at any time too. Most of them will be answering all of your Q&A at the end of today's session, but please ask them in the chat once you think of them. No need to hold back on it. We want to get a sense of how many people have questions so we can time out the Q&A at the end of it as well. If you have any technical questions, please message the host in the chat window. That would be me, yours truly. So go ahead and message me and I can see what I could do to help you out as best as I can. And if you're curious, want to watch anything again, share it with a friend, anything like that, or you need to leave early or anything, we will have the recording available later today on our YouTube channel. And I also want to thank this evening's sponsor, our presenting sponsor, William Blair, who's been very generous in supporting this event, as well as our Blast Boost event in the fall, as well as supporting Delta Institute overall. But I could probably only talk a little bit about William Blair. I'm going to turn it over to somebody who can speak much better about it than I can. That would be David Fording, who's a partner and portfolio manager at William Blair, where he is running both the U.S. growth and U.S. sustainability, ESG, or environmental, social, and governance strategies. He's a founding member of William Blair Investment Management's ESG leadership team, and also volunteers as a member of the Delta Institute's governing board of directors. Please welcome David Fording.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate the introduction. And just a few quick opening remarks, and I will definitely get to the heart of the matter here, which is the panelists who are joining us tonight to talk about this important topic. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Green Soapbox discussion on regional infrastructure for community and climate impact. As Patrick mentioned, I'm David Fording, a portfolio manager at William Blair and a board member here at Delta. William Blair is an independent employee-owned firm founded here in Chicago in 1935, so quite a while ago. Today, we have roughly 2,000 employees who operate in more than 20 offices worldwide, though the majority of my colleagues still work out of our Chicago headquarters. As such, we have deep roots centered in Chicago and in the Midwest more broadly. William Blair's expertise is largely in investment banking and institutional investment management, as well as private wealth management. And the firm has a long-standing tradition of engaging in our communities to drive both positive social and economic change. Two critical parts of our mission are both to engage in our communities, which we do, almost on a daily, weekly basis, but also to empower our colleagues. And as such, our community engagement program at William Blair is entirely employee-led, meaning we have a personal connection to every organization that we support. It is not a top-down driven process at Blair. Blair's relationship with Delta Institute, in this case, began when I reached out to members of Delta's senior leadership team, Bill and Sid, to inquire as to how I personally and how William Blair as an organization that really cares about the Midwest could help support Delta's important work. Across all aspects of William Blair, we pursue best practices in philanthropy, employee engagement, governance, and environmental stewardship, reflective, I think, of our values and our commitment to fostering healthy, sustainable communities. And we continue to be very impressed as I've gotten to know Delta and its leadership and the rest of the board and everyone who works and partners with Delta. Really, I've been so impressed with not only Delta's expertise in nature-based climate solutions and resilient agriculture, but also their strategic plan, which is one of the reasons I joined the board, because I was fired up about this strategic plan to expand sustainable farming practices and help deploy, in partnership with some of the organizations that you'll meet tonight, help deploy green infrastructure. So I'm especially excited for tonight's discussion on how Midwest communities are actively exploring how their existing and future infrastructure can support local resiliency and align with climate action goals. And finally, I want to say thank you to the Dells for putting this event together, and thank you to all of our panelists, including our moderator, Tracy Brown, for participating. I hope you all enjoy this evening's conversation and you learn a lot. And again, thank you so much for participating tonight. Back to you, Patrick.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it. Very well said. Loved hearing everything that you had to say about it, especially as far as your journey here. If anybody ever has any questions about how to get involved like David had, shoot us a message, shoot us an email, let us know what you're thinking about. Always happy to have a dialogue. All right, now let's get things started by introducing today's moderator. And it is my privilege and honor to be able to introduce to you Tracy Brown. Tracy Brown is the Chief Content Officer at Chicago Public Media. She joined WBEZ in 2019 as Managing Editor to lead news enterprise, investigations, daily news, and special projects. Now, as CCO, she also oversees broadcast programming, podcast, community engagement, events, and CPM's music station Vocalo. Tracy also leads editorial collaborations between WBEZ and Chicago Sun-Times. She spent over a decade as a news leader at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, as well as the Dallas Morning News, and worked at the St. Petersburg Times at South Carolina's the state newspaper. A University of Georgia graduate, Tracy is the current chair of the Grady College of Journalism Alumni Board. She is a board member of the Local Media Association, a member of the Economic Club of Chicago and the Chicago Network, a longtime member of the National Association for Black Journalists. Tracy is a 2021 Sulzberger Executive Leadership Fellow at Columbia University. Thank you so much for joining us, Tracy. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. First, welcome everyone. It's my pleasure to be a part of this conversation and to lead what I really hope is an enriching, discussion. So I'm grateful to Delta Institute for this opportunity to moderate. So let's get started. So I'm going to introduce each of our guests, followed by a question to give you an opportunity to learn a little bit about their work early on. And then after I'm done with introductions and some of the initial questions, I will put those questions, put some questions to the group collectively, and then leave a little time afterward, maybe about a half hour for you to ask some of your own questions as well. So first, we have Lottie Ferguson. Lottie is the Chief Resilient Officer for Flint, Michigan. Her experience in two non-sectors converged into this position, which is designed to help Flint recover from social, economic, and environmental crises, and to create a more resilient community. In nearly 3 years as Chief Resilient Officer, Lottie has worked to move the Flint community from survival toward thriving by facilitating the infusion of millions in local, regional, and federal grant funding. For funds provided for programs, centered around equity, community engagement, and environmental justice. Lottie is also a member of the RIC Solutions Network, which is a cluster of public and private sector professionals focused on climate resiliency via delivery of finance of market-based green stormwater infrastructure across the Great Lakes region. Lottie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So the first question I was just going to pose to you as part of like the initial kind of getting to know you. So the city of Flint, of course, made national news, began at least several years ago because of its water crises. Your office is working to help Flint recover from some of the social, economic, and environmental crises and to create a more resilient community. When you think about moving Flint forward, the Moving Flint Forward program, can you share what role you think resiliency plays for residents in the city?
Thank you for that question. And thank you to Delta Institute for the invitation this evening. So, I like to say that resilience is sort of like the net that holds up the city. So Flint, like many communities, has a lot of struggles. You've heard about the water crisis a number of times. I mean, it was devastating. It still is devastating to Flint. But in Flint, we believe that true resilience is tied to social, economic, and environmental needs. This is a huge job. It's a huge undertaking. It's a lot of work. But I just don't believe it's possible to build in one area of resilience in Flint and not address the others. You know, we've got folks here who are food insecure, who are still exposing their children to lead, not necessarily in the water, but in aging homes. There are residents who can't handle just a regular old spring shower, let alone increased rainfall events, because they need roofs, they need windows, they need repairs to their cracking foundations. You know, all of this is considered as we work to decrease poverty and crime and to make sure that residents have clean air and water. And so resilience, at least in Flint, is critical to the future of the city and moving the city forward. We can't build a future if we're struggling to maintain the present.
Right. Thank you for that, Lottie, and we look forward to hearing more. Our next panelist is Bweza Itaagi. Bweza is Englewood Nature Trail Steward at Grow Greater Englewood, and she's co-owner of Sistas in the Village Urban Farm. She moved to Chicago from Denver in 2015 to pursue her master's degree in sustainable urban development at DePaul University. Bweza is an urban farmer, community cultivator, and horticulturist. She views farming as a spiritual practice with the ability to heal communities and build collective power. Through her work, Bweza seeks to bridge intercontinental Black communities to build solidarity and resilience. Welcome, Bweza.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my question for you is, part of the efforts to advance Chicago's Englewood district, Englewood Nature Trail, is transforming a vacant rail corridor into a natural space for residents to enjoy and use to connect deeper with nature. What's your perspective on what the Englewood community is envisioning for the trail's future?
Thank you for that question. So first, I'll frame this project in the history of the space. So formerly, the train line, it's elevated about 18 feet above street level, was used for light manufacturing. Englewood at the time had a lot of industries clustered around that 59th and 58th Street corridor that were just moving material through the neighborhood, then connecting to the rail yards on both the east and west end. And since those industries have left, we've been given an immense amount of vacant space from the train line itself to adjacent properties next to the trail. So we as a community have been strategizing and envisioning what that could look like, and people keep coming to this idea of us needing space in the community for people to just gather safely outdoors and have that connection to nature. Currently, we do have great parks within the neighborhood, but they are not places where people have expressed feeling safe enough to go and gather. So for us, the vision for the nature trail is to connect some of the spaces throughout the neighborhood, connect potential future business sites, as well as spaces where farms are activating right now. And we just vision it being an agro-eco district is how we're terming it. Just really a space where centering Black culture, where Black community can come and thrive and convene in nature.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Bweza. So our third panelist is Eira Corral, Sepúlveda. Eira is the first Latina. Welcome, Eira. Eira is the first Latina elected to the Board of Commissioners for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, otherwise known as MWRD. She is a hometown proud elected official of Hanover Park, and a strong advocate for local community engagement and representation. Eira strongly believes that the MWRD plays a crucial role in protecting our water and our future. She is an advocate of the environment and has a passion to ensure that our children will have a better future and that the government is accessible and inclusive of all communities. She also began volunteering at the Delta Institute's Governing Board of Directors in 2022. Welcome, Eira.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for moderating, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. So I'd love for you to share more about your role as commissioner and how it impacts infrastructure decision-making.
I'm commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. I was elected in 2020, and we are a health and environmental agency with two core missions: sewage treatment and stormwater management. And the MWRD, as I see it, is at the intersection of some of the most important issues of today: workforce development, climate change, resilience, flood prevention, equity, and infrastructure. And as commissioner, I'm elected to represent the interests of our constituents, which is the entirety of the city of Chicago and also over 120 municipalities, suburban Cook County. And some of the major responsibilities that I have are to set a vision and approve a plan, approve an annual budget, and also contracts. With infrastructure specifically, we deal a lot with gray infrastructure and green infrastructure. If you've ever what runs under the city of Chicago and Cook County, we have a whole infrastructure. If you see the streets up below, we have sewage. But we also really want to emphasize the importance of green infrastructure and working with nature, stormwater management. So those are two major infrastructure we play throughout the region.
All right, thank you, Ada. So if we can bring all of our panelists on camera, and because I'd love for us to just like begin having a group conversation. And so in posing a few questions to the group, I'd love to hear from any of you on something I think a lot about as my growth in my own career. And then I'm going to preface that by saying, throughout tonight, you may see people milling about behind me. I'm in the newsroom at WBEZ, or Chicago Public Media, and it's election night. So the newsroom is pretty busy tonight. And at some point, we might even get an update. I know the polls close at 7 o'clock. So at some point, we may chime in and give you an update on where if the election is called, for those who are interested. So I'm just going to throw that out. But I wanted to talk a little bit about personal influences. And so my question is what shaped your early awareness and understanding of infrastructure, and what was your introduction to infrastructure as a potential career path for any of you?
Well, I'll take that one. I was formally elected in the village of Hanover, and I was elected at the age of 23. So for me, it was about making sure that our roads were paved and making sure that our water infrastructure was properly taken care of. But I learned so much more from our public works director, and I learned a lot about our sewage system. And for Hanover Park, we have MWRD in the north side of the community, but we also have our own sewer in the south side of the municipality. And so for me, it was really interesting to learn about, in the early 2000s, some of the changes that the EPA was going through for municipalities and waste treatment plants. I found that very interesting. I found it really interesting as to how we deal with our snow removal plan. For example, the city of Chicago and the Chicagoland area invests a tremendous amount of money in snow removal, and there's significant environmental impacts to how we get that done. We don't often think about that. So I was really thrilled to learn about some of the strategies that were being implemented in my municipality and how we were leading in the region to make sure that we were being more eco-friendly.
Thank you, Ada. So I thought I might point out, just because I know that there are different, I guess, levels of knowledge about this conversation tonight. And it really made me just think about infrastructure, right? Which is, facilities and systems, the services that are necessary, for us to run our households, our economy, and our businesses. And there are often things that I think we take for granted, whether it's water or utilities or roads. And my second question, just about kind of on the personal, was I was wondering if there are any highlights from any of your past experiences in the built or the natural world around that may have just, kind of shaped your perspectives?
Sure, I'll take that one. So my grandparents actually ran a corner store and fish market right across the street from General Motors Buick headquarters in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so in the 60s and 70s, the predominantly Black neighborhoods in Flint were demolished to make way for Interstate 475. Those communities, the St. John Street community and the Floral Park community, had been very prosperous communities thanks to automotive manufacturing plants. The population in Flint and those areas grew super fast as folks came from the South and came to Flint looking for jobs. But eventually, urban renewal took my family's business away. I was about 8 years old when we drove by the old store, my grandfather's Burgundy Electra 225. The last time we drove past that store, and what I remember vividly is rolling the window down and seeing just the sign from his store that was still standing among the rubble. That land right now in Flint is still vacant. It's adjacent to the third largest brownfield in the state of Michigan. And so I was raised on stories of not urban renewal, but urban removal, and how that particular interstate claimed what should have been generational wealth for my family.
Wow.
So I was never formally introduced to a career in infrastructure before municipal government. I worked in the nonprofit industry. And so everything that I've learned has been from folks like you, folks like the people on the panel today, and folks like the ones that are watching, and then taking my personal experiences and listening to those in the community to help me guide what I feel is best for Flint. The look on my grandfather's face after losing not only the store, but 2 houses to what I later learned was eminent domain will forever be a core memory. And I don't want another family to ever experience loss in that way.
Right. Lottie, what is there? What's there now?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's still vacant.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. So I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Bweza. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say thank you, Lottie, for sharing that story. That is so disheartening and unfortunately not uncommon in Black spaces throughout this country. And for me, I did not necessarily seek out a career in infrastructure. I wouldn't even say my career is in infrastructure per se, but more so my interest has always been how can communities have everything they need to thrive and prosper, and specifically marginalized communities, Black and Brown communities. And as I have gone on my journey of education and of also learning how to cultivate the land as an earth steward, as a farmer, it's been just so glaring to me the inequities, and I'll say specifically in Chicago, in Black and Brown communities when it comes to access to infrastructure to make our lives just more livable. And I approach it more from a justice perspective. It is unjust for communities in a city with as much wealth and resources as Chicago to still have to travel far outside of their communities to get fresh and locally grown food. It's a justice issue that in Englewood, schools close, a shocking amount of schools closed, and then students had to then leave their communities for education. And so my approach with both my work with Grow Greater Englewood and with Sistas in the Village is to help people see that this isn't just for convenience, but it's really infrastructure is I keep saying a justice issue. It really is, and it is impossible to talk about the inequities without also talking about race and class. So that's how I approach this. So for me, it's very personal as well, because I feel that it is my obligation and responsibility to use my voice when I can, and really make sure that my community has everything they need to live long and healthy lives.
Right. Thank you, Bweza. So I was glad that you brought up the Sistas in the Village, which I understand promotes the access to fresh and locally grown and affordable food in Englewood. I'd love for you to if you could, just to share more about that approach of centering the values of community empowerment and stewardship and like what that work looks like.
Absolutely. So my farm that I co-own is on 58th and Ada in Englewood, which is just adjacent to the Englewood Nature Trail. And as I mentioned, because that area used to be a light manufacturing corridor, there's high amounts of contamination as well as an abundance of vacant land throughout the neighborhood. So my I'll say with Grow Greater Englewood, our focus is on helping to clean up some of those sites, but specifically we're framing it more as healing the land. The contamination has been decades ongoing, and it's a mostly residential community. And as we've been analyzing more of the soil and the air quality, we see that these are directly impacting people's health and their quality of life. So as we, as an organization, have helped to remediate some of the sites, we also have been helping to create spaces for people to start farming businesses. So my farm is on a piece that used to be city-owned vacant land that had a temporary remediation done where we're growing about 18 inches above the soil level. We have a buffer, we have wood chips built over it, but our primary focus is just to grow food for our community and to grow food while also explaining and sharing histories and stories around the nutritional and spiritual benefits of certain crops. And why is it that people for centuries have eaten these particular dishes for these particular ailments. So it's more of an approach to public health, as well as an example of what can exist within our community.
Okay, all right, thank you for sharing that. Next, I wanted to really kind of talk about the impact of recent federal legislation. So we've seen an increase in some of the national interests and dialogue about investing in infrastructure. And my question is how has federal legislation, such as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Inflation Reduction Act, impacted the work that you are doing or that you want to do in your communities?
Well, I'll take that one. We recently actually passed or approved for us to move forward with an opportunity to be able to implement biogas. We produce a lot of methane, and so instead of flaring it, we're going to look to how we can reuse that as an important resource. I'm really looking forward to late the spring, early summer. We should have some studies that will be made available to us based on a pilot program that we have going on in Hanover Park, and looking to other opportunities to produce clean hydrogen. I am really, really thrilled and excited about what we can do in that space.
Okay.
Flint is doing some similar things with biogas. We are using the blowers in the water plants to try to reduce the energy use, from running the water plants. But we talk about the impact of federal legislation, and I really want to lift that there are definite ups and downs to this. So, communities like Flint have certainly benefited from discussions around infrastructure, obviously with the replacement of the water system here in Flint. But there are a lot of communities like Flint that would benefit better if we had more access to those funds. Communities like Flint just don't always have the capacity to write those proposals and manage the funds due to limited capacity, high municipal staff turnover, and the inability to strategize because, we're so busy putting out fires and making sure that residents have access to basic needs. So, we're not asking anybody to do this work for us, but, communities like Flint often get overlooked in funding opportunities like this because, of our limited capacity and limited access to information when funding is available. I learned about biogas blowers on a webinar, you know, much like this. And had I not taken the initiative to find out more, that wouldn't even be an option in Flint. So it's great that we've got federal legislation, but we also need to make sure that communities have access to the information that they need to advance technology to help support these kinds of issues.
Right. You know what, Lottie, I think you make a really good point, because when we think about we celebrate the bipartisan infrastructure law all the time, mainly because it's so huge and it's like $550 billion. And to think that there's all this money and that small communities or cities that could benefit so greatly from it and need it so much, not having the resources to just access that money. So.
Mhm.
So
You know,
I did, no, go ahead.
I wanted to follow, in the Chicagoland region particularly, we face a lot of the consequences of redlining and disinvestment in a lot of our communities, Black and Brown communities particularly. So you can definitely see the disproportionate impact of flooding on Black and Brown residents, and that is directly connected to disinvestment. And the idea that Lottie just shared of communities not being available to access the information, not only just access the information, but able to really effectively take advantage of a lot of the programs is a very real thing. Because a lot of times, we've been talking about infrastructure for well over a decade. We've known for a very long time that the infrastructure problems that we have in this country are vast, and not only vast, but spread all throughout the country. Even with the $550 billion that has come forward, it's really not enough. And for those communities that have been ready, that have been preparing, they're a little bit more prepared to take advantage of these opportunities when they finally open up. And they open up so quickly that before you know it, the money is gone. And that doesn't just happen at the federal level. Frankly, that happens at the city level, at the county level, and even at the district level.
Right. Thank you.
And I can just, as you mentioned, Commissioner, that's exactly where we were as far as being a community organization and trying to get everything together so that we can potentially seek out large funding. So for if people aren't aware, Grow Greater Englewood is a community organization. We are not connected to any municipal or government agencies. We're a nonprofit. So we had been working towards envisioning how we could reuse a vacant train corridor for years. Since I started working in this organization in 2017, the work had already been years in the making of us trying to make sure that we had ongoing conversations with everyone in the community to think how we would repurpose this space should we get the funding. But that should we get the funding piece was so many years. And so we went through a lot of iterations of getting our neighbors excited about the potential for this space and having beautiful design charrettes and community conversations and celebrations. Yeah. And then the funding wasn't there. So we would see then people were like, well, what's happening with this? Is it moving forward? And that's an ongoing challenge in working for a community organization is we are not typically eligible to apply for large grants unless we have a connection with a city agency. So fortunately, last year, we submitted an application through the city of Chicago for the federal RAISE grant, which was funding that the Biden administration had allocated specifically for infrastructure reuse projects. And specifically for reuse projects in neighborhoods and communities that had experienced high disinvestment. Naturally, Englewood checked all of the boxes, and we had said we've been working towards this for years, so I think we're ready. We did receive the funding through the city, and that opens up a new set of hurdles for us because now we have to make sure that we're staying on course and we are following all of the requirements for the grant. And it only really is possible because we had the collaboration partnership through the city.
Right. Bweza, where do you all get the majority of where does the majority of your funding come from?
Majority is from foundations
Mhm,
through grant funding.
through
Yeah.
grant funding, right?
Mhm.
Thank you. So while we're on the theme of equity, this next question is really about representation and equity. And I wondered if we could talk a little bit about community representation and how equity factors into the infrastructure decisions in some of the projects that you have worked on. Any takers for that one?
Nobody wants to answer first. I'll jump in on that one. I mentioned, the urban renewal that decimated the St. John Street and Flora Park areas in Flint, and how much those folks, including my family, lost. And those folks that are still around and their descendants are actively involved in the revitalization of the area, including an installation of a memorial park and a pedestrian bridge over the Flint River. As we consider the future of that interstate that split the community in half, we're talking about, is it still relevant? Do we still need it? Should we make changes to it? Those voices from the community are those are among the folks who we are turning to for direction of the future of 475. So do the plans that we propose acknowledge the discriminatory past and create a path forward that is both positive and inclusive for all of our economic, environmental, and social needs, or is it not? That in Flint, representation and equity were hard lessons to learn in the building of 475, and also in acknowledging that there are problems with the water. And so it is very, very important that in order to rebuild community trust, that we have to look at everything through a lens of equity, and we have to make sure that residents are involved and represented in every decision that we make.
Right, thank you, Lottie. So I did want to add, and in particular, as we're talking about community trust, and as well as community engagement, even in media. I mean, I formed a community engagement team, mainly because we recognize the importance of building meaningful relationships with the people that we serve. And this is, somewhat related to the question about representations, but I wondered, what avenues have you observed, for promoting community engagement in infrastructure decisions, empowering people within their own communities and shared spaces? Have you found any success in those areas?
We have tried so many different strategies for making sure as many voices are heard as possible. So at this point, when we're publicizing or advertising community events, we do a mixture of digital posting, but specifically we now have what we're calling our block stewards. So along the trail, there's about 30 residential streets, and we are in the process of hiring one person from each of those blocks to be their street's representative. So they are receiving a stipend from our organization, and then they are the ones going door to door, letting their neighbors know about upcoming events. Because we realize that we, as our small organization staff, cannot reach everyone, but we can implement different strategies to try to just have community members let their community members know, because that's really the ripple effect, or more the mycelial network of true community. You can't just expect that you post some things and send some emails and people will know. And also that gives us an opportunity to create more employment opportunities. And now the block stewards have ownership in this process as well, because they are a part of the project. They are taking on the responsibility pridefully of letting their neighbors know what's happening, because we have to know what changes are coming in our community before it's right in front of us. So that's an ongoing strategy that we've been using. We're also working with different schools to get young people, high school age especially, involved in the project so that they can be the ones also in meetings with the city to share their ideas and share their voices. But what that also requires just some foundational knowledge of this process. We found in some of our early community meetings that some questions would come up and people would have some suggestions, but it seemed that there needed to be just a pre-conversation almost ahead of the community meeting so that we know, like, these are almost like a glossary of terms. These are some terms and topics we'll be speaking on. We want to make sure that everyone is clear so that we can ask questions to the city or to, the planning agencies when we're all in the same room.
Can I add here, that is a, great points. But one of the things that we do in Flint is we try to make sure we go to where people organically congregate. We are not asking folks to come to City Hall or other places where they might not be comfortable. It just burns me up when the sheriff's office holds an expungement fair in front of the police department. That just doesn't work. When we go to places to talk to folks, we also try to make it worthwhile for them. We gotta let people know that you value their time. In one example, we wanted to talk specifically to parents. We held a community engagement meeting at the Flint Children's Museum. We served dinner. We gave families gas or gift cards as they walked out of the door. There always isn't money in the budget to do things like that, but we find ways to work it out with whatever resources that we have available.
Right. Great points. I was part of a civic conversation a couple of weeks ago where some community members were, just talking about how frustrated they are about not being able to have input about some of the decisions that are made around, infrastructure, but around community, or even not having given the opportunity to have input or giving their input and then decisions being made, pretty much dismissing the input. And I wonder what advice you might have for both sides who are trying to balance, providing input against some of the dynamics that go into the power of decision-making.
Well, I'll take that one. We're a very large public government agency. We serve about 5 million constituents throughout the Chicago and suburban community. And I would say that I have seen individuals that are very successful in making their voices heard because they are organized and persistent. And so when you're trying to push something in government, it's very important to stay continuously engaged because often government is very bureaucratic. And the process can take long. And so if you're trying to push against, or you're trying to push for something, it may not come right away. But if you stay continuously organized and persistent, that goes a long way. And frankly, I think it's important to engage in the democratic process. You mentioned earlier, this is election day. If you are an organized community in the electoral process, that is also another leverage that you have. It should be that people listen to the constituents and they look at the needs equitably. But I have found that in government, we are a part of a larger system that isn't really built for people that are Black and brown. As a Latina, I have sometimes struggled in different places and spaces to push forward for initiatives that will bring that responsiveness. But even when we do that as electeds of representing of historically marginalized groups, we need people to back us up too. We need our community to back us up because sometimes it's, us alone pushing forward for some of these initiatives. I'm very lucky that in this particular government agency that I'm a part of now in the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, we have a majority board that is majority women and majority people represented Black and brown groups. But, again, even us within that space, we're part of a larger system that is built with a long history, and those are hard discussions to have with people. So I would encourage you to be organized and persistent. Just because you don't get it within the first few months or the first year or even couple of years doesn't mean that is it going to get there.
Thank you, Ada. Thank you. So I did want to talk a little bit about climate and climate change, which has not always been a priority when communities do planning and implementation for infrastructure. And are you all seeing where governments and cities are showing more consideration toward environmental sustainability as part of their planning process?
I can say yes. I have been in this work, in this space for maybe 10 years. I'll say I'm newer to this space, but in those 10 years, I've seen the progression of initially when we were having conversations with city agencies about the importance of having land in the city designated for growing food. The response was, that's something we can think about, but it wasn't connecting in people's heads initially. And in those last 10 years, as we've seen the striking, glaringly obvious signs of climate change with extreme weather to just land no longer being suitable for growing food throughout the world, we see that this is an urgency. And now groups are circling back to us saying, we remember you're the people who are doing the food stuff and the farming things, like how can we support? And for me, I have to put my personal aside because I do want to be like, we've been saying the same things this whole time and now you're finally hearing us. Okay. But also, great. Thank you for hearing us. We really need to make sure that we have systems in place to make sure that everyone is safe in the case of any type of like serious climate emergency. And for me, my approach is different than the other panelists in that I am really from a small grassroots community organization. So what we're doing is much more micro scale as far as giving classes and workshops on how to grow and store food, and giving workshops on how to just save food, store food in case of emergencies. But it's really a lifelong journey and a lifelong effort, because the climate, even this season, my farming season is going to likely look different than it did last year, because that's how rapid things are shifting.
Right. Now, Bweza, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lottie. I'll come back to my follow-up.
So climate change still is not a priority in Flint. There are still a whole lot of basic needs that have to be addressed. But organizations like Bweza's is how it will become a priority in Flint. So thank you so much for your work. And, we've got some organizations in Flint that are striving to do just what you're doing in Englewood. And it's only going to become a priority here when the community lifts it. So what we've tried to do was to slip some of this work into our master planning and into existing projects, bus shelters with green roofs, zero emission buses. I already mentioned biogas blowers for a water plant, LED street lights. We just kind of sneak it in where we can.
Yeah. So the thing that when Bweza and with the comments were making me actually think about, I was reading a story this week about, and actually that was in on our website, about this young woman. I want to say she lives in suburban Chicago, but she was in the city. But during the pandemic, she started, trying out gardening, and then started a TikTok channel, and that now has like over 70,000 followers, a lot of young people who are, embracing gardening. And she gives all kind of tips about how you can, whether you have a big backyard or you want to start small. And I wondered the work that you are doing on what you're how you're able to engage younger people into this movement, particularly with climate change, because it is they're going to be, you know, their future. And I just wondered if what that looks like, you know, the work you do and how you engage young people.
Thank you for asking that, because that's a huge priority of mine, is to make sure that I am reaching to the generations behind me to show them and connect them to the land. Because I find that it's not such a challenge to get young people, I'll say high school and younger, outside. They just have to see people doing it first. So for me, I try to be very enthusiastic when we have high school groups come to the farm and be like, this is actually some really cool stuff. Like, I'm just gonna let you know right now, the stuff that we're doing here is very cool. And you can see they're like, okay, why is she so excited? And then I have to break it down and be like, it may look like we're just, you know, growing our little tomatoes and corn and peppers, but this is some radical stuff right here. Because imagine if you could grow your own food, then you would have full control and agency over what you're putting in your body, at least when it comes to food. And then you can tell your friends and you can share recipes and you can do cooking things. And so I see how slowly it's really like planting a seed. And I watch it slowly grow in these young people's minds. And then I see them coming back to the farm and I see them saying, maybe I could be a farmer. And that to me is the most beautiful part of it. And to what you were saying, Tracy, the scale is not a determining factor. Whether you have a windowsill where you're able to grow a few little plants, or you have a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket where you can put soil, or you happen to have a couple acres of land, whatever the scale, we can and we should be growing food if we're able to, because this is crucial for giving back to future generations, because we can't just let everything become paved and built on. I think that's where I say, I have a career in infrastructure, because I really have a career in the land, and the land being the biggest form of infrastructure that we have. So it's extremely urgent, and is something that I feel honored and grateful to be able to do. So if you're in the Chicago area, please come by my farm. I would love to just have everyone get their hands in the soil and reconnect.
Yeah. Well, count me in. I would love to. Yes.
Me too. Maybe you can help me with my not so green thumb. I tried that pandemic garden, and I killed most of my crops, unfortunately, but I grew some cucumbers, and I've continued to grow some herbs. So, you know, I'm getting there. And I also want to note, you know, you mentioned you don't see yourself as infrastructure, so having a future in infrastructure, but I would say the future of infrastructure is the work that you're doing. Thinking about how we use the land, and how we use the land not only for paving and development, but also how we use nature in development. So you're definitely really breaking ground when it comes to the future of infrastructure.
Ada, your comments really kind of lead me into the next question that I was going to ask, which is really about innovation, because there just seems to be, you know, it's funny because when Bweza talks about farming, it reminds, you know, me of decades ago when I was, you know, growing up in rural Georgia, and, you know, we had a farm in our backyard. But there are still, I mean, so, you know, of us getting back to our roots, but there's still like so many innovative and technological advances that are happening, particularly that kind of overlap some of the sectors. And I just wondered if any of you had any examples of either, you know, projects or partnerships that kind of showcase some of the innovation in this space. Even if it's not directly to, you know, for you, but maybe it's what you're seeing someone else do or some other city or organization.
I don't know if it's necessarily innovative, but our Parks Department and our Department of Public Works right now are working together to make sure that Flint's River is returned to its natural ecosystem. So General Motors channelized the river so they could, you know, the runoff from the plant had someplace specific to go, and so it's caused a lot of issues with the ecosystem in the area. And so we've got a couple of dams that are on the Flint River that were actually listed as among the worst in the state, and would be it'd be a catastrophe if either one of those failed. And so DPW and the Parks Department have worked together to make sure that the dams are either removed or rebuilt. In the case of the Utah Dam, to be technologically and functionally sound for years to come. We want to make sure that we allow fish passage. We have pedestrian bridges that access the parks on either side of the river. One in particular will connect a trail that runs through the entire county. Flint is getting its first state park in the same area. Like Bweza mentioned in her introduction, it is very important that we continue to provide spaces for people to enjoy outdoors where they feel safe and where they feel welcome. And so that project in particular, it's still underway. I cannot wait until we finish it. But the partnerships have been with Department of Natural Resources, our Parks Department, DPW, and the city residents have been a big part in making sure this happens.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I did want to move to Bweza. I saw you come off. I don't know if you had anything to add before I transition over to taking questions from the audience, because we did want to leave a little time for people to ask questions. So the first one I'm seeing, and forgive me if I pronounce the name wrong, Jare, who is curious about the balance between grassroots and community efforts and the need for strong partners, either in government or from larger nonprofits. And the question is, what does that look like, and how to keep the community members, how do you keep the community members engaged while also navigating some of the bureaucracy of those types of partnerships?
That's a good question. I think I might be able to take that one too. So this year, the city of Flint rolled out an opportunity for nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations to apply for some of the ARPA funds that the city received. And so what we did to try to encourage some of the community-based organizations who fully believed that there was no possible way they were going to get any of this money is we contacted 5 technical assistance agencies. They are also smaller nonprofit agencies, and we provided training to them so they could, it was a train the trainer sort of situation, so they could help the smaller nonprofits and community-based organizations and neighborhood groups apply for the funds. And so we brought in folks who spoke Spanish and Arabic, and we had access to sign language interpreters to make sure that when we did workshops or they did one-on-one meetings with those organizations, that they were able to get all of the documentation together, get their applications in on time, and then later we'll also provide support so they understand how to handle the reporting that goes along with that. And so we're in this hoping that we are teaching those folks how to fish rather than just giving them some fish. And so we're hoping that they will in turn be able to apply for additional grant funds through partnerships with the local government, to local foundations and other public and private funding sources.
Thank you.
I can speak on that as well. I believe it's crucial for small grassroots community organizations to have partnerships with larger agencies, but that requires a lot of trust building. Naturally, within our communities, we do not trust larger agencies like city government. And that resistance is there for good reason and for a long history of redlining, discrimination, racism. So for us, we really had to start to build trust with the city, really. And for a while, we were operating more from the perspective of like, okay, let's just demand, insist, we're organizers. And that's what we were doing. And we saw the way that sometimes folks in the city were like, okay, like we want to help them, but they're not the easiest to work with sometimes. And so we had to come to a point where we're like, okay, let's have some offline conversations, just so that we're clear that we are human beings, hopefully working towards a similar goal. Whether you work for the city or not, whether I work for a community organization or not, if we know that we have a shared goal of making our communities safe and healthy, we have to work together. So that's where we are at this point. We do now regularly communicate with folks in many city agencies, and that has allowed our work to move forward. As I mentioned, that federal RAISE grant, we were only able to apply to it through the city. And that has made our work easier, unfortunately, but we very much are still in, I'll speak from my own perspective. I'm still very much in the belief of, okay, like we're good for now, but as soon as you all start causing any issues, we're gonna have issues again. And that's part of the work too, is we do have to be constantly pushing and insisting and demanding the things that we need. And we have only been able to make the financial strides that we've been able to through those partnerships.
I'll also speak to that from a place of intersect, as someone that started as a grassroots organizer and now have been in elected government for well over a decade. So I think what Bweza says is very real, especially in the environmental justice arena. Environmental justice has been, in our country and in our communities, we understand the environmental impacts to our families that are suffering asthma, our families that are suffering lung cancer, a myriad of public health concerns. But the issues are framed differently. The environmental advocacy space has been largely not really been inclusive of Black and Brown communities. And so I hear what Bweza says, because I've heard that within the government area, not saying in the district, but even speaking to other elected officials. Oh, careful working with that organization. Oh, they did this, they did that. And so that's a very real thing. So if you're working with an organization, I think you have to be very clear of defining your mission and your end goals. I think there's a place for people that are able to take a middle ground, but there's sure as heck a place for people that are pushing, because that's what it needs, in my perspective. It needs to be a push and pull, inside outside type of game. And that's more on like getting into power dynamics. But if you are not pushing more than what government is prepared to offer, we're not going to move fast enough. So don't get discouraged if you are working with a grassroots organization and you feel that your end goal.
Did we leave? Did we lose Ada? Okay, well, hopefully we will get her back. In the meantime, there are a few questions that have popped up in the Q&A. This question is from Sarah, who asked, when working on a long-term project, how do you keep a community engaged when there are large gaps between milestones and the work naturally slows down? That's a great question.
Information. We make sure that we keep folks informed of what's going on, remind people that government is slow. that is very much part of rebuilding the trust with Flint residents, rebuilding the trust with the community. We've got a fantastic new website and a great social media team, and we show up at neighborhood and community events, and we talk to people, and when they ask questions, we give them answers. You know, we can't tell folks everything, but we are as inclusive and as transparent as we possibly can be, and we do things to help people understand. We bring our whole selves to those conversations, so residents know that yes, I'm a real person, and yes, I'm accessible, and I want to help. However, we have these things that we have to do in order to get to where you'd like us to get, and you keep your word. You make sure that you inform folks, and you do what you say you're going to do. You show up when you say you're going to show up. You be on time. You stay the whole time. You listen, and you listen not just to respond. And all of that goes around with building trust and encouraging folks to come along on the ride with us. Just lots and lots of information.
Thank you. Thank you, Lottie. So the next question is, how do you measure impact in each of your spaces, both climate and community impacts?
That is a tough one. I'll say from a community perspective, I measure the impact, and I'll speak specifically to my farm right now. I measure impact by seeing how neighbors start to interact with the farm. So initially, when we first started working out there, I'm telling you, the work was hard. We're in the middle of a residential space, and so people would see me out there on 95-degree days, pushing wheelbarrows full of soil and laying it down and planting seeds. And I initially would, I say hi to everyone, like, you're welcome to come here. And they're like, okay, all right. And then a week goes by and they're like, wow, you're still out here. You're still doing this. I'm like, yeah, you want to come? They're like, no, I don't. And then fast forward a month or so, those same folks, our neighbors, would then come and finally feel comfortable entering the farm. And that's how I measure the community impact. I'm not taking numbers. I'm not counting how many times that's happening, but those small moments to me show that this is worth it. And this is something that is a labor that takes time. And now as we're just starting now, it's, we're not yet planting outside, but we're preparing the space. I see people drive by in their cars and stop and ask questions like, what's going on here? And we're always receptive to say, like, this is our farm. We're two Black women growing food for community. And seeing people just being willing to stop and ask and convene with us is the most important piece. As far as the climate part, that, at least on my space, will take more time to observe and see how the ecosystem is regenerating. Already we see a lot of birds are active in the area. We see a lot of insects, and just signs of life are coming back to these spaces that have been vacant for 50 plus years. But it's really an ongoing process of noting and seeing the shifts.
Thank you, Bweza. Our next question is, how can us at home engage with causes or efforts that your organizations are driving forward?
So I'm curious, is that a question about joining our efforts specifically, or joining efforts in your local community? If it is joining efforts in your local community, there certainly are neighborhood groups. There certainly are community-based organizations and nonprofits that are doing the work. And it is a quick Google search to find someone and to send them a message on social media, or call them, or send an email and say, hey, what opportunities do you have specifically for volunteers? If it's related to the work that I'm doing, again, social media, website, email. We are a community of volunteers in Flint. We like to say we've got a lot of folks who like to volunteer for a lot of things, and so we love help from everyone.
Thank you. And then that next question was kind of is pretty much the same one. It was from Claire, who also had a question about how community members could help, like things that they could do in specific ways to support the work.
Well, as we're shifting into warmer weather, I know there are a lot of community events happening everywhere. So I encourage everyone to just show up and take the initiative to speak to people. I mean, everyone being in this session now, you're showing up, you're doing great. Continue to do those things. And I've found that it's best when you do go to a community event to make the time and have conversations with folks and then show up to their next event, because that recurring ongoing interaction is relationship building. And that's the best way to support this work, because it is ongoing. So I just encourage folks to go see what's happening. Like Lottie said, social media is a great resource. Websites, I feel like a lot of small organizations promote the bulk of what they're doing on their internet presence. So that's what I would say. But to support my work specifically, I can drop our websites in the chat. But yeah, we promote, publicize, advertise most of our events. So please come and support if you're in the Chicago area.
Thank you. Lottie, this next question is from Sarah, and it's to you. And she said, thanks for your input on long-form community engagement. And I'd love to hear more about the ways that you and the other panelists are building trust with communities that are used to being underserved.
So we're very much still working on this, with everything that's going on in Flint, from poverty and crime to recovery from the water crisis, divisive elections, lack of transparency in government, and just an overall default emotion of mistrust. We're learning that it's on municipal government to rebuild the trust with residents, not for residents to work to find ways to trust us. Again, recognizing that everything can't be shared, we try to be as inclusive and transparent as possible, to make sure that residents have as much information as they can, enough good information, so they can make decisions on their own. But it is building trust is an ongoing effort.
Thank you. Eira, I see you're back. We're sorry that I think we missed a little bit of your last comments that you were making.
Yeah, my apologies. I've been having trouble with my internet. So if you've noticed, I've been kind of like moving like this because I had to switch to my cell phone earlier in the conversation, and then my phone left me as well. So sorry about that, guys.
But no, welcome back. So I know we just have maybe like 10 more minutes. I don't know if there were any other additional questions, but it's always at the end, there's so much heavy stuff that we talk about, some of the inequalities and, concerns, but what's exciting you about the work that you're doing? Like, what are you excited about?
I am excited that we recently passed an environmental justice policy. And even though it's a policy that establishes more of a commitment, I think it lays down the groundwork for some really cool stuff to come up. I am excited that we're going to start discussing our climate action plan for the district. I mentioned earlier in the conversation the opportunities with biogas, but also the opportunities that we may have with solar and wind as well. So The other thing that I'm excited is last year, within the last year, excuse me, we approved 2 positions for the environmental justice section. So that was very exciting, but now we're evaluating how we may be able to restructure or structure that as a section, or potentially as a department. That's a discussion that we're currently having at the board level. So I encourage you to tune into that conversation, to advocate, and to work with organizations to make sure that we're meeting that purpose.
Thank you. And the last question in the Q&A is kind of related about what inspires you personally to keep doing the work, and what do you do to recharge to keep going? I'd love to hear that, especially that second part.
Let's see, what inspires me? I think what's inspiring is seeing the kids who are learning this work through a lens of equity and technology that we never had access to. What are these little geniuses going to come up with in the next 20 or 30 years? The folks that are watching, what are you going to come up with tomorrow? And innovation, and seeing what's next is what's really exciting to me. And the recharge, I like to sew. And so my favorite thing is to find something that someone's thrown away or I've thrifted and upcycle it into something new and amazing. It's a great way to not put something else into a landfill, and also to relieve a little bit of stress myself.
You have a store?
Do I have a store? No, wherever I find things.
You just do it for yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Something that excites me, was that the question, or
Or
what
inspires you personally to keep doing the
inspires?
work, and how do you recharge to keep going?
I get inspired from so much, honestly. I just seeing young people being excited about this work and the forthcoming agro-eco district really energizes me. And to see and hear the stories of folks who share how they've just watched the space stay vacant for so long and have been waiting for an activation. And now they feel that they have a vehicle for sharing their ideas. That excites me. And just really creating a space where people feel heard, and not just for the sake of one meeting, but like, we will hear you and keep hearing you. And it's also just exciting that our project with Grow Greater Englewood is going to be the first agro-eco district in the country. And this is a project driven by Black community members. That is exciting to me and keeps me like the work. I have to keep working. I have a lot of work to do.
Right.
But to recharge, I really am a nature person. I need to be outside as much as possible. So I like to take walks, sit by the lake, and I also take lots of naps because this work is tiring and I need to rest.
Right. Good for you. I wish I could take naps or make myself take naps. Ada, what about you?
What makes me excited is really being able to engage communities that have not been engaged in the past. We, like, as you mentioned earlier in my bio, I'm the first Latina elected to the district, and so that is very rewarding. It's a very large community. There are a lot of communities that have been largely disenfranchised, and so to have that opportunity to represent the Latino community, the Northwest suburban community, I'm the first elected from that region, but also understanding that that representation has not been existent in the past for so many other suburban regions, for regions within the city as well, is very exciting to me. I'm also excited to work with organizations and stakeholders that really care about the work that we do. I like to be very active, whether it's on social media or our community events. We like to be out there. I like my office to be out there. I have a great team and they're grassroots oriented as well. So that's an important value for my office as commissioner. And I recharge, I like watching comedy shows. I like to laugh. And I like hanging out with my kids. We just went to Comic-Con to E2 and that was like fun. And you know, they encourage me too. My son is leaving to college next this upcoming fall, and he's going to study engineering at Purdue. So I'm really excited for him, and I'm excited for the future. Just having gone to so many of these college visits and seeing other kids so energized about how engineering can change the world, environmental engineering, civil engineering. In my line of work, you know, we deal a lot with engineers at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, so it's really energizing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So just in the few, we're 3 minutes before we wrap up, but I wondered, I know, you know, some of you have already included your websites and your contact information in the chat, but I wonder, are there any activities or resources, events that you wanted to share before we end?
We have so many events coming up this year. I'm not even going to just list them out because it'll just sound like garbled things. But please do tap in with Grow Greater Englewood. We have monthly community meetings that are for the community, but we also have in June we'll be starting our Saturday markets, where we have a pop-up market on the corner of 58th and Halsted every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have fresh produce available, some of which I have grown myself. We have always incredible performances, DJs. We have local vendors selling prepared hot food, and then it's like a market bazaar, and it's always a beautiful gathering of community. So beginning mid-June, and it goes through late October until it gets too cold. So please join us.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Well, if you want to come to Flint, and please do, because we are more than the water.
Yes, indeed.
Stop by in August for either the Crim 10-mile road race. You get to see most of the city on foot. It's a 10-mile block party. It's really a great time. Or if you want to know more about the history of automotive in Flint, there's Back to the Bricks. It's one of the largest car shows in Michigan, right on the bricks on Saginaw Street. And those are both in August. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you.
On my end, this is National Gardening Month. So follow me on social media. I put my handle on the chat. So go ahead and follow me on Twitter or Facebook. We are having a month-long campaign acknowledging not only gardeners. Every week we are acknowledging the Gardener of the Week, but also sharing tips throughout the month. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I have quite a few events throughout the year, but my next two are on April 11th, 2022, with the Arab American Business and Professional Association. We are having a MENA Business Roundtable, and if you're not familiar with MENA, this is the Middle Eastern North African community. It has been a community that has largely been left out of affirmative action programs, particularly for MENA men, and out of the census. So we're really excited about some of the things that are going on with the MENA community and being more inclusive of this community within our opportunities for contracting. And following that, we have a really awesome event with Mayor Thompson. It's an environmental town hall, and that is going to be in Broadview. She's not only the mayor of Broadview, but she's also appointed chair of the National League of Cities Committee on Environmentalism. So I'm really excited to learn more about what she's been doing with that.
Okay, thank you, Ada. Well, that is our time, and I just want to take a moment to really thank all of you for joining us here. I want to thank our panelists, Lottie, Bweza, and Ada, for just sharing so much about their work and things that we could do as well. And Patrick, I don't know if you wanted to come back to close us out, but thank you for the opportunity to have this important discussion.
Be my pleasure, yes. And thank you, Tracy, as well, for guiding us through a wonderful discussion. Thank you to all the panelists. Such a great discussion from everybody. Loved everything that you all had to share. So thank you so much. We'll be sharing a link to all those resources dropped in chat later, as well as the YouTube recording. Feel free to check it out. Give it another listen to it again, because there's a lot of great stuff that was shared. So thank you all. Again, if you're interested in the Green Soapbox panel, I'll leave this slide up for anybody hanging around. But otherwise, thank you all for attending and participating in this important discussion, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.